What's the number one mistake companies are making with vulnerability management?
They think that they have to fix everything, and
That
they
was
don't.
easy. They don't have to fix everything, right?
They know how to fix everything. Only what matters to actual risk to the company. We have this concept of celebrity vulnerabilities, and when something new pops up, everybody's texting each other, and then we put all resources to fix it. And then you're not aligning into risk. And if you look at what happened with Log4j, people spend way too much time fixing Log4j when in many cases it did not align to the risk. And so I call it like jumping and trying to fix it rather than having an approach of, okay, let's look at everything and then fix what is more important.
Hello, everyone. This is Rick with the Cyber Pro podcast. Industry leaders share their insights. I'm pretty nerdy. I'm going to nerd out a little bit today because I've used the product that you are the CEO of for a while in my own life. So I'm excited for you to be on this podcast, Sumedh. So tell us right away who you are and why you are awesome.
Well, Rick, thank you for having me here, and it's great to hear that you've been a user of Qualys. I'm hoping was a happy user. In terms of nerding out and who I am, I'm the right person to do that with because I have been at Qualys for the last 21 years, and I started as a software engineer. So I'm all about the tech. I'm all about the technology. I'm a technologist, and I've had the pleasure of being CEO of Qualys the last few years, and so it's been a definitely exciting journey for me, starting back in the days when people used to scan one supporter and give everybody 90 days to patch, and it was all easy and beautiful. Now down to where exploits and attacks are happening within minutes of vulnerabilities being declared and stuff like that. So certainly been an interesting journey, and for me also coming from more of a technologist background into leading the company versus sort of more from a sales financial background. So it's been interesting journey for me, very exciting.
No, that's amazing. And so I think most of us know what Qualys does, but give us the high level overview, especially since you came from working in the weeds and now you're leading the company.
Look, it's all the cybersecurity is all about risk management, right? And so I think for us many years ago when we started with vulnerability management, that was a key aspect of managing risk to your digital assets was to know your vulnerabilities and fix that. And what's interesting is even in the latest Verizon data breach report, exploitation of vulnerabilities still continues to be one of the most leading causes for hackers to get into your systems. And so it's like in some ways things have changed, in some ways things haven't changed, right? And so for Qualys, what we have really done the last few years is evolve with the market where the focus initially was just show me everything, show me what's bad and my exposure. And sort of it went from there to say, well, I have too many findings because you have too many digital assets to what are you gonna do just by showcasing your exposures and taking selfies with them, right? Like we gotta get things fixed. And so we evolved the solution from just detecting vulnerabilities to patching. And we were one of the first ones at the time to really have that vision and disrupt the market by saying, look, we can also fix it for you. And that was a big game changer. And just in 2024, Qualys deployed 110 million patches in our customer environment. So it's been a great, happy thing for us because we've helped customers actually fix things as well. And in the last couple of years, we've evolved that even more into what's very clear is that as digital assets are being deployed and new technologies gonna keep coming, uh, risks are gonna keep coming. And the question that you're gonna have is, I just cannot fix, and you should not fix every single thing that is being detected. So, what are the things that are important, and how do I measure the risk? How do I communicate the risk? And then at the end of the day, there is no value in cybersecurity if you don't eliminate the risk. And so, how do I eliminate the critical risk factors? And so what Qualys we do today is really we are a partner for our customers in cyber risk management, and we help them measure their risk, we help them communicate their risk, and we help them remediate their risk across the board, not just vulnerabilities but beyond that.
No, that's amazing. I love the idea of the risk management piece. Let's take a couple steps out, right? Let's go a little macro here. What is one or two trends that you're seeing in cybersecurity today that maybe you didn't see in the past that you're intrigued about?
Yeah. Look, if I, as I mentioned, right, when I started, you would scan once a quarter and you would take 90 days to fix, and that was good enough, right? And I think with more digital infrastructure being deployed, overall attackers are moving more towards attacking you on digital than physical. And I always give this example, right? If you want to rob a bank, instead of having 50 different crews at 50 different branches in 50 different cities, all trying to coordinate everything at one time. If you look at what happened with Bank of Bangladesh, you could just go into a central server and you can take a lot more money than you ever would with a physical attack, right? And so that is really what highlights what is happening in cybersecurity is that digital infrastructure is accelerating the use of digital technology for a positive purpose, but it also means that we just have a lot more things that we're deploying and a lot more findings, and the trend has moved more towards we're just not going to be able to fix, and it doesn't make sense to fix every single thing. And so people are overwhelmed with the volume of risk factors. And really, the question that comes up is, well, what is the thing that I should really fix then? What is going to give me the biggest bang for my buck in terms of reducing the actual risk? And so I would say that what used to be more of a best practices based approach to cybersecurity, well, I should have this deployed, I should have that deployed, is evolving more towards not just best practices, but aligning it with the business conversation on business risk that is caused by your digital infrastructure and how cybersecurity spend is aligning to reduce that risk.
I think that's amazing. Let's flip it a little bit. What are some common misconceptions that you're hearing today around cybersecurity?
I think the misconceptions comes from how things have been done in the past. People uh, the biggest thing I see is like I have to fix everything that's bad, and that's not what cybersecurity is about. Is you really need to fix the most critical things that can cause the worst outcomes to your business. And so what we're really seeing is that just because you have a particular vulnerability or you have an attack surface, it does not mean that that is something that you really need to spend time and money fixing it. You have to really move from attack surface management to risk surface management, right? And I give this example of if you have a big house and you have plenty of doors and windows, and you really spend $1 million getting the latest technology to make sure that there's sensors and cameras and every single door and window is absolutely um, closely monitored and secure. But then, if an attacker did get into the house, the maximum you could lose is $50,000 cash in a drawer. So you just spent $1 million securing something when your maximum loss would have been $50,000, right? That's what I mean. Move from attack surface. So all your doors and windows are your attack surface, but is risk surface is your $50,000, right? So how do you bridge that gap between I don't want to waste my money on, doing all of this if my maximum loss is only this much. So what we're seeing is this misconception of like, oh, just because I have a finding, just because there is an open port, or just because this, I really need to fix everything, right? Like in any risk management, there is nothing like zero risk. So it is all about how do you really focus on managing that risk down to an acceptable level is really the focus. And that's the misconception that people have had in the past is like, oh, I got to fix everything that is being reported by my tools.
No, I love it. Let's dig into the risk conversation. We hear a lot of people talking about it today. The industry's talking about it like crazy. A lot of people that I talk to ask me, well, help me quantify it. So, how does quantifying risk kind of bridge the gap between the technical team and the board where you've sat in both seats?
It is interesting, right? When I went into my first board meeting and I'm looking at my CISO present to the board, it was really eye opening to see that the board, rightfully so, right, does not quite understand and should not really even care about, oh, here's all my vulnerability findings, and they're like, that doesn't mean anything to us, right? And then people pivot to like, well, here's all the things I fixed, but that still doesn't mean anything to us. Well, I implemented MFA, but what does that mean to the business, right? Can you at least tell us, are we 5 times safer than what we were? Like, tell us something. And so that's really the big gap right now is, initially CISOs, and I always joke about this, as CISOs really wanted to be in the boardroom because cyber is important. They wanted exposure to the board. Then after the first board meeting, they're like, I don't want to go back in again because they don't understand what I'm talking. I don't understand what they're asking. But at the end of the day, if you look at really as a business, and the board is just a representation of sort of the business, right? The business is in the business of doing the business, and the cybersecurity is a risk management exercise. And so at the end of the day, anything that you do, and this is where some of the challenges come, is that people have not operationalized the risk management process around cybersecurity. You have multiple tools, each tool has a top 10 dashboard, but what does that mean overall to losing $10 million in the business on a daily basis, right? So what the board really wants to know, We have a $500 million a year business. If there is a ransomware attack, we could lose up to 10 million a day. And today, based on all the different tools that we have, we are at an elevated risk of losing that $10 million a day. And if we fix these five things by spending $250,000, it will bring the risk down of losing $10 million a day by 80%. That's the conversation needs to happen in cybersecurity, and that is the gap that people have not been able to bridge. That you how do you operationalize all your findings into a business value quantification? And I know security leaders, like, we don't know how do we do that, but the business has always been doing risk management, right? Every single business has different ways. So I just spoke to one of the customers, and they, as a hotel chain, they have risk management, and they look at their business. Oh, what is political risk? What is geopolitical risk that could happen, that would impact our business? What is natural disasters that could happen? So how can cybersecurity plug into that? And that's where the risk operations, operationalizing risk management, and where we came up with this idea of a risk operations center, because people know a SOC. Now how do we build out a rock? Was very interesting for people, because they want help. They need help to say, how do I think of what I'm doing in cybersecurity, how that aligns to my business?
Let's dig in a little bit more on that risk operations center. I'm curious to hear kind of how that evolved and really how every modern CISO, but also every modern company could utilize it in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of what we deal with all the time, right? So you have risk scores that are given by different tools, right? And so I ask customers saying, look, you have two business units. One has a risk score of 900 on 1,000, and another has a risk score of 700 on 1,000. Which one will you, and you have only one resource, which will you prioritize to fix first? They say the 900 score is high risk score, right? I want to make sure I bring that down. Say, well, now let me give you additional piece of information. The 900 risk score is on a business unit that makes 2 million a year. The 700 is on a business unit that makes 500 million a year. Now tell me, where would you put the resource? That one additional piece of information completely flipped your prioritization on its head. And that's what I mean about, it's not just about your best practices. It's not about what technically that attack surface could do. It is really about what is the impact it can have on our business, and that should drive your remediation effort, right? Where you should focus on. And so the risk operations center is bring all of your assets in one place, which is a challenge everybody has. So you have full asset visibility. Bring all risk findings from your code scanning tools, your vulnerability scanning tools, your cloud scanning tools, your IoT scanning tools, all in one place. Apply threat intelligence, apply business context, apply threat intelligence to reduce what is not actually exploitable, apply business context to say, yes, I have these bad things, but how many of these are actually important to my business? And then orchestrate a remediation plan, and then create compliance reporting, right? Like, compliance is what pays the bills for cybersecurity in many ways, right? So how do you operationalize all of that in one single place, rather than having multiple dashboards in every tool that only give you one silo? And so this idea has really taken shape very well with our customers, because they like this idea of centralizing and operationalize risk, because that's a more strategic conversation, right? As a CISO, if you're asked by the board, what is your strategy for cybersecurity? And if your response is that, oh, I'm going to deploy disk encryption for the next 1 year, right? That's not a strategic initiative. But if you say, and the question is, what's the outcome of a risk operations center, right? Because that is how you get a business outcome. So one of the things that we just recently did in one of the POCs was that we had a customer, we imported 65 million findings from their multiple tools in the risk operations center. Once we applied threat intelligence to that, it actually came down to only 2 million had any real possibility of being attacked. And then we applied business context, that went down to 300,000. And so the way the value that is bringing in cybersecurity is that if you don't use a risk operations center where you're centralizing your risk, you are actually asking your IT team to fix things that don't matter to the business, which is a waste of business resources. This is the time IT and development could have used to create the next big competitive differentiator. Instead, they spend all the time patching and fixing things that actually at the end were not anything meaningful to the risk, right? So it's come up really well. Customers like the idea. It's easier to explain to their management as well, instead of saying we have a security data lake or something like that. And centralizing all of your keys risk factors allows us to do more things like you're leveraging agentic AI and some of those things to help you even further in triaging and reducing your risk. So the Risk Operations Center and our Qualys, our version of that is called Enterprise True Risk Management, is really all about how do we help you operationalize your risk and then tie it to the business and get an actual remediation done.
I love it. You brought it up, so I'm gonna pose the question: how is artificial intelligence really supporting what you guys are doing, but also how is it affecting the cybersecurity world? Because I know you guys have some good answers on AI, but also how is it affecting? So it's kind of a two-part question. I could answer either way.
I'll put my technologist his hat on, right? It almost feels like I have to be apologetic when I'm talking about AI these days because everybody's talking about AI. But look, I think the concept of machine learning has been there for a very long time. We were leveraging it as well before ChatGPT brought generative AI to the forefront, and people love it and it has its uses. But in a business context, generative AI by itself is not necessarily very useful because you really have to have a lot of interaction with it. But where I got really excited, and we didn't call this, we didn't talk a lot about AI in the last couple of years because generative AI was the chatbot. That's how everybody's doing that. But where I got really excited is that today with agentic AI and with the MCP protocol, there is a tremendous opportunity to really make your existing systems actually interact with AI based systems really well. And so agentic AI is making generative AI truly useful by being able to orchestrate different things between your different LLMs, and it's really lending itself to what I call as a AI native platform. Right, a few years ago, we started to see cloud native platforms where you had less of your own code and more services from your cloud provider that you are using as part of your application. AI native is even less of your own code. You are really just orchestrating multiple LLMs together, and so it's really an AI native application is becoming very different. So where I felt like the value of agentic AI truly is in being able to operationalize risk management has a lot of different tasks that you have to do. A lot of them are mundane, a lot of them are repetitive, and so what we did is we launched this concept of a cyber risk agent and a marketplace of cyber risk agent. And so the idea that you can go into the risk operations center, the Qualys ATM solution, see expert agents that are available out there. So we have personas, we have names, and you will have Agent Sarah is a Patch Tuesday expert. You have Agent Jonathan is a ransomware expert, and so they are really good at orchestrating, collecting data from multiple different sources, and picking of actions and getting you a result. And the way I have thought about this is agentic AI at Cyber Risk Agent can augment how CISOs work with their team. So you have a team of analysts, human analysts, right? And then now you can go into the marketplace and say, look, for the next 2 weeks, I want to focus on Patch Tuesday vulnerabilities. And now I can employ a digital worker that is an expert in cyber risk for ransomware as an example, and they will work on this for 2 weeks, and then they will come back and tell me what they have analyzed. They will tell me, here's my plan, and then they will go execute the plan, and they will come back and give me what I did, right? So it is almost like we're entering this new era where you have a combination of the human experts being supplemented and complemented in a way by agentic AI agents that can actually achieve different tasks that can help reduce the efforts that the humans are putting in trying to get into an outcome from a risk operations center. And so we're pretty excited about the ability that we provide agents that are experts already in certain areas. Customers can create their own agent, and in the future we will also have, because of our marketplace, partners can bring their agents. And so could the outcome of a risk operations center be, hey, call this agent from Zscaler that can then go and actually apply a zero trust policy as a response instead of patching? That's where you see the agentic AI agents coming together, working together, and creating something that truly helps us in the future.
I love it. And I know that you guys have innovated before. And so let's go back to one of those other innovations. You have called out some traditional vulnerability management vendors for only pointing out the bad things, the issues, right? But
Yes.
you guys were able to integrate patching and it's been a game changer. So why has that been a game changer? How has it reshaped the industry?
Look, anyway, it goes back to Qualys, as an innovator, as a culture that we have really about talking to customers, listening to them, and not so much just like, oh, because the industry analysts have certain categories that you have to follow that, right? Like that's part of the business. But if you stay close to the customer, and this is where about 4 or 5 years ago, as I go out and talk to a lot of customers, it was becoming apparent that the challenge was not as much just finding vulnerabilities. They were really struggling to have an impact. They're saying, look, I'm spending all this money. I show my IT team all of this stuff, and not a lot is getting fixed. And it worries me that we're sitting with all this risk. And so I figured, like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to come up with a disruption and innovative approach and think something very different that is aligned with what the customer is looking for. Of course, when I launched that initial idea that we could do patch management with Flawless, I can tell you a lot of competition and industry experts went on record to say publicly that this does not make any sense, and then nobody will use patch management from Qualys. But I will tell you, in 2024, just the fact that Qualys was able to deploy 110 million patches with our customers, that really makes us one of the top patch management vendors in the space, really focus on cybersecurity. And so it's been very fulfilling and exciting for me at a personal level to really just see that our thought process, our innovation is a game changer, and it is definitely help us as a company, create a revenue stream that makes sense, but also for customers who are able to actually truly have impact of their cyber programs by showing that not only did I point out all these issues, but we actually help fix so many issues and thus reduced the risk. And so we're doing the same now with the Risk Operations Center and Agentic AI, right? Nobody has really come up with this idea of a risk operations center that can help you triage your risk and tying risk to business objectives and also getting remediation done. So again, there is no category from these analyst firms around the risk operations center. There is like, CTEM is a category that everybody talks about, but CTEM just exposes your exposure.
Yep.
So what's the point of exposing your exposure if you're not fixing it, right? And by the way, like I said, the CTEP solution will tell you your risk score is 900, but if you don't know the dollar value loss, your prioritization is entirely flawed, because the moment I give you the dollar value loss, your prioritization can flip on its head. What you thought was the highest priority now becomes the lowest priority. So really, the Risk Operations Center sort of takes the CTEM capability, consumes that into that, and so yeah, nobody's done it. We're innovating. It's new. But that's what you need to do in the industry, is to come up with newer, simpler solutions for the customers than just following what your competition is doing. And so we're excited about what we're doing in terms of innovation here at Qualys.
I love it. All right, hot seat for you. The next few questions, 30 seconds or less. First one, what's the number one mistake companies are making with vulnerability management?
They think that they have to fix everything. And
That was easy. They don't have to fix everything, right?
they know how to fix everything. Only what matters to actual risk to the company.
Love it. All right, next one. You've coined the term vulnerability whack-a-mole. What is it and why is it important?
We have this concept of celebrity vulnerabilities, and when something new pops up, everybody's texting each other, and then we put all resources to fix it. And then you're not aligning into risk. And if you look at what happened with Log4j, people spend way too much time fixing Log4j when in many cases it did not align to the risk. And so I call it like jumping and trying to fix it rather than having an approach of, okay, let's look at everything and then fix what is more important.
All right, if you could only fix one thing this week, because you fixed a lot of things in your previous years, this week to reduce cyber risk, what would it be?
I I think whatever is the thing that brings me the biggest risk to my business is my priority, and that could be anything. Right? Of course, I cannot talk about that here, but for me, I always look at it from my CISO perspective. I ask them, "Well, how much risk is this causing the business?" I don't want to know the technical thing of what it can do. Is it like, if it does succeed, what would happen to my business? And that's really where we focus on, and that's what we have done with our reporting.
Why do most CISOs struggle, 30 seconds or less, to explain risk to the board?
I think because they themselves don't think of it from a business risk perspective. A lot of CISOs have come from best practices and technology, and so they think of all the bad technical aspects and outcomes that a particular exploit can have. And so this is where strategic CISOs, as they go into this new era, have to be the ones that are thinking business and thinking, how do I tie things to business? They just have not come from that, and they struggle with, and that's one of the reasons why for them to be looked at as a strategic business value adder to the company, they need to be able to think of the business and understand how, what is important to the business, where's the money coming from, and what would happen if a cyber attack does succeed.
I love it. This has been a lot of fun. I have one final question for you. Why do you love being a cyber professional, and why should people want to become a cyber pro?
Uh, that's a really good question. I think if you look at what's happened in the last few years, there's a severe acceleration of digital technology in our daily lives, and that has made our lives significantly better in many ways. Digital infrastructure is everywhere. However, if we did not have trust in those digital systems that we are using every day, we will stop using that, and we will go back to where we were 40 years ago, right? And so imagine not being able to call a Uber from your phone, as an example, right? And so the way I look at that is technology is transforming our lives, and the trust in those digital systems is brought about by cybersecurity. If we didn't have cybersecurity, people will not use these latest digital technologies, and then we would not be making the kind of rapid progress as humankind that we are making. We would not be making that, and so that's why I love being in cybersecurity, because the impact that we have when when we protect so many banks and governments is really good to know. Like today, you cannot go through your day without using a product that's secured by Qualys, and it's a big thing for us. And so I'm excited about cybersecurity, and I think, I always say this: till there are humans, there will always be doctors and nurses required, and so till we have computers, you'll always need cybersecurity. So it's also an evergreen field.
I love it. Sumedh, thank you so much for being on the Cyber Pro podcast.
Thank you so much, Rick.